Hi, it's Super Videos back at you for another Q&A video. This is going to be Q&A number 11. Now, obviously, if you're not caught up with the comic book or the TV show, you may not want to watch this because I may spoil some things for you. So consider this your spoiler warning. I'm gonna jump right into these questions. Let's start with the Walking Dead show questions first. The first question comes from Roleplay Ezekiel, and he asks, how do you think season 7 will end? So I actually did a video about this, but I can quickly talk about it here as well. So I think what we're gonna see at the end of season 7 is the moment in the comic book when Rick and the others attempt to kill Negan and things don't go as planned. If you read the comics, you know. And at that point, Negan lines them all up and has Lucille in hand, and it looks like he is about to murder someone else. I won't get into what happens next, but if they do that, and if they end the season like that, it's kind of like everything went in a circle, and it kind of makes sense because the season starts with the lineup scene, and it will be cool if it ends with the lineup scene. But regardless of the lineup scene being there or not, I think it's gonna end with Negan's failed assassination attempt, for sure. The next question comes from the Black Antihero, and he asks, do you think we will see the head explode when the Lucille death happens? I think we will definitely see that, and part of this question is basically how gory and bloody the Lucille death scene is gonna be. And I think if they are gonna stay true to the comics, they have to be as gruesome and as bloody as they can be on TV, because it's necessary. If the amount of gore and the blood is not there, we may not get the emotional impact that we got in the comic book. And if they want to stay true to the comic book, like I said, they have to make sure that impact is at least the same as it was in the comic book. It can be a bit different, but at least make the impact be where it needs to be. And also, another thing to point out here is that it's not only about the gory scene, because obviously in the comic book it has to be about the visuals, but in the show they can add a lot of more factors to that, like sound. I think sound is gonna be a big part of what makes that scene hard to watch as well. And I think it was Scott Gimple or Greg Nicotero who said that it's not only about the scene being gory, but it's about the sound. And it's probably going to be screams, crying, wood hitting the head, hitting the skull. Like we actually heard some of that in the finale of season 6 where we actually heard the head crack. And basically the sound is going to be a very important factor in how gory it is as well. But that's a very good question. The next question comes from Steven Moraga, and he asks, do you think Rick will wake up from his coma and it was a dream? No, I'm going to say this here. If they ever do that, either in the comic book or the TV show, I'm going to stop watching and reading the comics if it happens in the comics, because that's just one of the worst things that they can do. It's like all of this story, all of this build up, all of these character development, and at the end of the day, it was just a dream. Don't worry about it. So like I said, if they do that, I'm going to stop watching. The next question comes from Omar Khan, and he asks, do you think the show will make the head on the spike scene from the comics a cliffhanger, like they did the Lucille scene? So I'm not sure what he's referring to here, because the heads on the spike in the comic book wasn't a cliffhanger, really. We did see the people that died, and I guess the cliffhanger part of it is who did it, but that's not really as big of a cliffhanger as the Lucille death scene is. So I guess if he's referring to that, then it's obviously going to be a cliffhanger. They're going to do the exact same thing in the show, I think. They're going to end the season, whatever season it may be, season 9, season 10, with the head on the spike of whoever they're going to choose at that point, and it's going to be a shock in the TV show as well. Probably not for comic readers, but for non-comic readers, definitely. The next question comes from Roleplay Morgan Jones, and he asks, why wasn't Rick terrified at the Terminus lineup scene, but in the Lucille lineup scene he was? So that's a great observation, and I think the main reason for that is that he's really helpless because of the amount of people Negan has. Because if you think about it, when he was lined up at Terminus, there was only 2 or 3 of the termites there around. And also the people in the lineup, only 3 or 4 of them Rick personally knew. And they were at the end of the line. And the start of the line was people he didn't know, really. The termites started beating those people first. And Rick had an idea of what to do, so he was planning it, he was waiting. And because of that, he wasn't terrified because he had a plan in mind, and there wasn't really a lot of the termites that he had to deal with, at least in that room that they were in. And because of that, he wasn't terrified. But during the lineup scene of Negan's introduction, we see he's very terrified because there's 50, 60 saviors in front of him. He has no plan, nothing he can do, because anything he does will lead to a death, and he knows that he's going to be responsible if he acts and someone dies. So that probably will make him hesitant to do whatever, and he's not going to risk that. Also, the reason he is not terrified at Terminus is because Carl is not in the lineup. If I remember correctly, it's Rick, Daryl, Glenn, and Bob. Michonne is not there. Carl is not there. These are the people that matter to him the most. At least at this point. Michonne not really for that specific moment, but definitely right now Michonne is important to Rick. And he'll do anything to keep both Michonne and Carl safe. And if you remember, in the lineup scene for Negan, Carl is there, Michonne is there. So anything he does, there's a risk of Negan killing Michonne or Carl, the people he cares about the most. And that's what terrifies him the most. And that's why he probably will not do anything unless he thinks that it won't harm them in any way at least. But that's a very good question. The next question comes from Perimelian Overlord, and they ask, how do you think the show would have been like if Rick died in his coma? So if Rick died in his coma, I don't think there will be a show at all. There won't be a series, a Walking Dead series, because the Walking Dead series, both in the comic book and the TV show, is all about Rick. We start the story with Rick. And if Rick wasn't there, then it wouldn't be the same series anymore. We can't imagine what the show will be if we started the story with Carl or Shane. We can predict, but none of those predictions would be realistic because anything we say, it's going to be speculation. And we can't really know how it's going to be unless we see it. So we can't really speculate unless we see it. And, I would have to think about it real hard, and for each character it's going to be different, obviously. So that's a very good question, but it's just difficult to answer. The next question comes from Steven Moraga, and he asks, what if it's Aaron who gets stabbed in the guts by Negan instead of Spencer? I don't think that would work because there's no setup for it, and Aaron has been very loyal to Rick, and I don't see a reason why he would disobey him. Also, we've already seen hints of Spencer's feelings towards Rick, and we are basically getting hints of that specific moment in the comic book coming to life in the TV show already, so I don't think they would change it. I think they're gonna stick to the comic book for this death and have Negan kill Spencer. The next question comes from Clifford Bateau, and he asks, which do you think are the worst, Daryl fans or Glenn fans? And he went on to explain why he thinks that Glenn fans are the worst. In my opinion, I think obviously every character has their own fans and it's different with every fan, and we're all big fans of these characters, and we're gonna talk to others who may disagree with us in a negative way, but that doesn't mean that we're worse than they are. It's just that we're very passionate, and that's the end of that, because I don't think it's fair to say that Daryl fans are the worst when only a selection of Daryl fans are being hard to discuss things with, or the other way around, Glenn, or anyone else for that matter. So I don't think we can stereotype Daryl fans and say that they're the worst, or Glenn fans, and it's just, you'll have to get along, and it's just a show. We gotta remember it's just a show, and we have to learn to discuss things and talk to each other in a positive manner in the comment section as well. So that's all I have to say for that. The last question is a comic book and a TV show question, and it comes from Primilian Overlord, and they ask, do you think that Rick will ever die? And I already answered this in one of my previous Q&As, but I just wanted to put this out there again, but I won't be answering questions that I've already answered anymore. This is just the first time this has ever happened, so I just thought I will answer it again. To answer the question, Rick will definitely die. I think it'll probably happen at the end of the series, when the series is going to end, either the show or the comic book. But I think we're definitely going to see Rick's death. And I think the series just won't be complete unless Rick dies. And I'm not saying this because I want Rick dead. It's just that from a storytelling perspective, we start with Rick, we have to end with Rick. So that makes sense the most. Or another possibility is to shift the story towards Carl. So have Rick die still, he has to die, but then the story can shift to Carl. So it's not like we start with Rick and then we end up killing Rick. But it's just a matter of moving the story forward by following Carl and looking at the new world in a different perspective. And having Carl become a leader. But that's it for this Q&A video. Leave your questions in the comment section below and I'll be answering your questions in my next Q&A video. It's probably going to be happening in a week or a week and a half. Also make sure to put Q&A before your comment so I can find it. It's very important that you put Q&A because obviously right now it's not going to matter because I'm not getting that many comments, but when I end up getting hundreds and hundreds of comments, I'm not going to be able to read all of those comments and it's going to be difficult for me to filter it out if you don't put Q&A before your question, and I'm going to miss your questions if that's the case. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll be back for another video.